Welcome to Our Darlington, the podcast where we explore the heart and soul of Darlington through its local independent businesses and the people that make it special. I'm James Carver.
I'm Henry Carver, and we're here to shine a spotlight on our beloved town. Join us as we sit down with the passionate local people to delve into their stories and uncover the unique contributions they make to our community and to find out about the town where we live.
Get ready to be inspired by the people and stories that make Darlington truly special.
She said, well, I want you to do what you did for me, for other families.
Wow. There's 900,000 potentially children in bed poverty.
Only around 2% of social housing properties are furnished. Now, if you think about it, the majority of people moving into social housing, they're going to be some of the kind of most vulnerable people in society.
Today's guest is Rose Lee Goff from Zarach, a charity tackling child bed poverty across the UK. Zarach has recently expanded into Darlington and the wider Tees Valley, working with schools to provide beds, bedding and essentials for children who don't currently have a proper place to sleep. It's an important conversation about the reality some local families are facing and the difference the charity is making locally. Good morning, Rose.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Could we start with something that's maybe an obvious question, but if I don't ask it, we will never know. What is bed poverty?
So bed poverty is, I guess as the name suggests, it's where a child doesn't have a bed, or perhaps they do have a bed, but that bed isn't suitable for them to get a good night's sleep. So it might be that it's damaged, it's not safe. It might be that the mattress is uncomfortable. They wouldn't be able to sleep on it because there's springs poking out. It might be that they've got a bed, but they're sharing it with siblings. So we'll quite often go out and see maybe a double bed with several siblings sharing, potentially, once they're past an age and a gender where that's really, appropriate for them anymore, or where they're sort of kicking each other, bothering each other in bed. I've been out, I've seen families where there's children as old as kind of 5, 6, 7 still sleeping in like the little cot that you might have for a toddler. One of my colleagues tells a story of going out and there was someone sleeping in the bath on some bedding. So, we've seen the whole range, but really what it comes down to is someone that doesn't have an adequate bed to get a good, comfortable night's sleep, so they're feeling rested and ready for school the next day.
And how did the charity come about? Where did it begin?
So we're going back a few years to 2017. Our founder, she's called Bex, and she was an assistant head teacher in a school in Inner Leeds, a very deprived area. So she was really used to seeing the day-to-day impacts of poverty on the families that she dealt with. One day she had a little boy in her lesson and he just wasn't being his usual self. He was something just wasn't quite right with him. So she kept him behind after class and she was saying, what's up? And she said, she noticed he was yawning and he was kind of scratching, and she said, are you tired? And he was like, oh yes, I'm always tired, miss. And she's thinking, oh, maybe you're staying up late, and he said, well, I haven't got a bed. So she did a little bit more digging, and it turns out that him and his 2 brothers were sleeping on sofa cushions. The sofa cushions were infested with bed bugs, so they were just awake all night itching. And she thought, well, obviously this isn't right. And she had lots of different places where she might be able to go if a child maybe didn't have enough food to eat, or if they didn't have gas and electricity. But there wasn't really anywhere to go for beds. But she just couldn't kind of get the thought of this little boy out of her head. So she kind of went around her family, friends, local businesses, and managed to pull together enough money to buy beds for each of these 3 brothers. And then she turned up at the house with her dad. She managed to get her dad in to deliver the beds on his van. They turned up at the house thinking they'd just sort of drop these beds off and that would be that. And then as they were helping Mum to carry the beds into the house, she realised that this house, it didn't have any furniture at all. There was one of those kind of white plastic garden chairs, and that was all the furniture that this house had. And she kind of had a bit of a chat with Mum, and Mum had to flee from a domestic abuse relationship very, very suddenly. And so it ended up in this house with really nothing. And was obviously doing her best to get back on her feet for her and her boys, but at this point in time really didn't have anything. So Bex kind of went away, and I think it did prey on her mind a little bit, the fact that this family had kind of gone under the radar for so long, and thinking, well, how many other families are like this in Leeds? And then about 8 weeks later, Mum came back with some cash in an envelope and said, "Oh, I've come to pay you back for the beds." And she said, "Oh no, you don't need to do that. You didn't need to pay me back." And she said, "Well, I want you to do what you did for me, for other families, because you were kind of the light in my darkest day, and I want other families to get that as well." And that was kind of how it all started, really. And it's just grown from there.
Wow.
And when did you move to Darlington, the Tees Valley, and how did you sort of, I guess, realise there was a need for the charity in the area?
Well, as they grew out of Leeds and kind of expanded through West Yorkshire, I think it became an ambition as well to look at other areas in the country with high levels of deprivation. And as we all know, Tees Valley does have some very high levels of deprivation, so that was one of the areas that we looked at. So we launched in Tees Valley coming up for 2 years ago, just initially in Stockton and Hartlepool. And then we got some funding that allowed us to launch in Middlesbrough, which we did in September last year. And then most recently we've launched in Darlington and parts of Redcar and Cleveland, which we did from around January, beginning of this year.
Fabulous. The name Zarach, I've never heard that word before. Is it a name? What does it mean?
Well, it does come from that phrase, light. It's light in the dark. It's a Hebrew word for light in the dark. So that's where it came from.
Right, okay. And tell us, what's your sort of daily role? I mean, how do you get pointed in the right direction to these underprivileged families and people ultimately that you're able to assist?
So, one of the things we've always said is we don't just want to be like Argos, sending the beds out. And for us, our mission, it's around ending childbed poverty, but it's not just that. It's then allowing that child to get a good night's sleep in order for them to thrive in education. And as I've just said, obviously we're set up by a deputy head teacher, so we've always had those really, really kind of close links with schools. So we have a schools-only referral policy. All of our referrals do come from schools. Having said that, we quite often it will be a social worker or someone that will go into the family home and become aware that that family doesn't have a bed, and they'll usually kind of just liaise with school, and then school put the referral into us. So when we launch in a new area, as we've just done in Darlington, then we try and work really closely with all the schools to kind of build up the relationships, make sure that they know that we're there, and then we also work with them just to make them a little bit aware of some of the things they might be looking out for, because obviously not many kids are going to come into school and say, "I'm living in bed poverty." Like, it's just not going to happen, is it? So it's trying to raise a bit of awareness about the sort of things that teachers maybe should be looking out for. Those things like rings under the eyes, yawning, seeming very tired, falling asleep. But it can also go the other way. We know that tiredness can also make children appear much more hyperactive, and sometimes it can be mistaken for things like ADHD and stuff. So it can have a whole range of effects. But if there are concerns, and if teachers have noticed a change in behaviour for that child, or a drop in attendance, or regularly being late where maybe they weren't being late before, then we just encourage them to have a bit of a conversation with the families and just find out if there's anything more going on. Then at the point where they've identified that a family doesn't have a bed, then they can make a referral into our service. We get the referral, and then either myself or we've got one of the members of staff in the region will receive that referral, will make contact with the family, and then we will go out. And the first thing we always do is a home visit. Now, there's lots of practical reasons for the home visit. It makes we can be sure the beds are going to fit. We can make sure we've definitely got the best beds for that family. But also it allows us to have a conversation with that family and say, well, what are your other barriers to education? We know that if a family are struggling to get beds for their children, there's a really good chance that there's other things going on for them as well. So we can try and see if there are other barriers, such as maybe struggling to get uniform, struggling to get food for the family, other things that might prevent that child kind of being their best in school. Then we can kind of signpost them onto other agencies, or sometimes it's just as simple as letting school know. When we come in, we're just there to offer a bed. We're not there to have a conversation with them about attendance or do anything that kind of might come across as more intimidating, or sometimes families can have difficult relationships with some agencies, so we do find they tend to open up to us and will sometimes tell us things that they haven't told other agencies, and it just allows us to make sure they're getting all the support they need for that child to thrive in school. And then once we've done that, then we'll always feed back to school the conversations that we've had, let them know that the beds are on their way, and then delivery day will come around. The delivery team will deliver the beds. We always try and do it between 9:30 and 2:30 because we don't want to mess with the school runs. And then the families have their lovely new beds, and hopefully the children can start to sleep a little bit better.
Amazing.
Amazing. I read a statistic on the website which was quite mind-blowing, that you're aiming to do 1,000 beds a week. Is that right?
That would be what our long-term goal is.
Yeah.
So next year, over the whole country, we're hoping to deliver over 6,000 beds.
Yeah.
But obviously, that is it's a big target. So that's why we're trying to reach out to more different areas. So we've kind of in the Tees Valley, as I've said, we've sort of grown from the initial small areas, expanded into a bigger area, and we are hoping to replicate that in other parts of the country as well. So we've got a small small hub in Stockport that delivers out to areas in Stockport, but we'd hope to be able to expand that and cover more of the northwest. So certainly it is ambitious, but that we know the need is out there. So Bernardo's did a report a couple of years ago called No Crib for a Bed. And they estimated there's around 900,000 children in the UK that don't have a bed to sleep in. So, we know that there's a massive need out there.
And 6,000 beds a year, it's going to cost an awful lot of money. So how are you funded, Rose?
So we get our funding from a whole range of different areas. Locally, we get some money through the big lottery funding, but we try and kind of balance it out so we're not relying on one funding source. So around 40% of our income does come from individual givers, so just people that want to set up and give to the charity. And around 12% comes from local businesses. We also have businesses that will donate us the beds that we give to the family, or will provide the beds to us at kind of the cost price to them without kind of adding on the additional profit. So again, we can get them for a lower cost. And we have lots of businesses that will support us, either kind of through fundraising or through grants, charity of the year kind of thing. So we having initially been a Leeds-based charity, we have a lot of connections within Leeds. But as we grow in Tees Valley, we're trying to build those connections with local businesses up here as well to kind of give us that sustainability into the long term.
Okay.
Do you do sort of, once you've delivered the bed, I guess that's not just it for that particular family? Do you do check-ins? Do you revisit after a year and just see if everything's okay? What's the sort of the follow-up? Is there any sort of stories that you've got that you've really made a difference, really?
Well, we do certainly follow up with both the schools and the families afterwards to see how they're getting on, what get feedback from what the experience has done to them. We found from what the schools tell us is that 95% of the schools say that it has made a difference to areas like engagement, attendance, general overall well-being of the child. And what we sort of overwhelmingly see from the families is that the feeling that their house is their home increases hugely from kind of quite low percentages, around 40%, before we go and deliver the beds, to afterwards, sort of 80 to 90% of families saying that their home feels like a proper home to them. So it is really lovely to see that it does make a difference, and we quite often get sent all the photos of the bed set up, and it's just amazing how much difference it makes. If you've maybe had like a mattress on the floor or some cushions, to suddenly having this nice bed and the bedding, and it's all set up nice, and it really does make a huge difference for the children.
Yeah, no doubt. You obviously explained how it all began a few years back, obviously. How did you get involved originally?
So I've been involved for about 2 years now. So I'm the family engagement manager. So I started when we launched in Hartlepool and Stockton. I'd worked in the charity sector for a little while, but it was a really great opportunity to kind of launch in a new area and be able to do something for so many sort of local families. And to start with, it was just me. But then as of September, we've got another member of staff, which is lovely. So we've got a little team up here. And one of the things we're also trying to do is recruit a team of volunteers, because we can train volunteers to go out and do that initial home visit. And obviously, the more people we have doing the home visits, then the more families we can reach. So that's one of the other things that we're aiming to do now that we're kind of established in more areas.
I was going to say, the stat that you said before, the Bernardo's stat of 900,000 potentially children in bed poverty. It's potentially quite a hard thing for teachers to spot. Again, I'm maybe making an assumption here, but would sort of children try and keep it to themselves that they don't have a bed? Is there sort of an element of sort of embarrassment that they don't have a bed if the friends have a bit more than them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of the families that we deal with, there is that sense of embarrassment around it. And I think a lot of the time, I think people can have certain assumptions around maybe the sort of families that use the service. But actually, all of our statistics show that a lot of the families will have at least one parent in work. And it just gets to a point where it's a big cost, isn't it? If you've got to go and get a new bed and mattress and bedding. And it just gets to the point where that becomes unmanageable as the cost of living's increased. We all know that that's been difficult for people recently. So yeah, I think there definitely can be that sense of sort of shame from the family. And then for the child, there's that embarrassment. And also for some families, it sort of almost becomes the normal as well. Like if they've not had a bed, well, that wouldn't be something they particularly think to say, oh, I don't have a bed, because they've never had that bed.
Yeah.
Just sort of, it's the norm for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a shame.
Yeah, so it can be a tricky thing to spot. And I think that's why, as I said earlier, when we do work with the schools and when they register with us, part of what we try and provide them with is just that information of things to look out for that would be kind of a helpful starting conversation. And as I said as well, that there will be other agencies going into the family home that may become aware of it, so they can work with schools as well to make sure that schools are becoming aware if a family doesn't have a bed.
So if there's a teacher listening today who would like to get in touch, how can they do that?
Well, if they go onto our website, which is just zarach.org, there's information there all around our referral process, and then they can follow a link to get started with registering in the first place and then making referrals. And there's a sort of emails and contact details as well if they have any questions.
And likewise with businesses interested in supporting or individuals who might be thinking of volunteering?
Again, just head to the website. Yeah, there's a whole section on kind of supporting us, whether that's through fundraising or volunteering or whatever it is that people are interested in doing.
Yeah.
There's a good video on the website, isn't there? I guess that's Bex on the video, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could probably tell with the Leeds accent. It's a powerful video, and obviously you can tell that it is really making a difference. You've got a sheet in front of you there. Is there anything on there that we haven't touched on? Is everything covered?
Well, so I think we've covered most of it. I mean, I guess another thing that's sort of interesting to be aware of is, so obviously, as I said earlier, we've got this figure, 900,000 children without a bed. Now, we know that realistically, we can't get a bed to all of those children ourselves. So part of what we do as well is around kind of influencing, and we can use the information that we have, the relationships that we have with schools, with families, to make that a really strong case to kind of policymakers, people in a position of power, to make some of the changes that we think are needed. So at the moment, we know that within social housing, only around 2% of social housing properties are furnished. Now, if you think about it, the majority of people moving into social housing, they're going to be some of the kind of most vulnerable people in society. It's really hard to get social housing. So if you're going into social housing, you're going to have a lot of different things going on for you. And so then to be able to afford to furnish a house on top is quite unrealistic. Yeah. So one of the things that we would like to see change would be for more social housing properties to come fully furnished for the families. So there's lots of things like that where we try and influence and make a difference to families rather than just delivering the beds. So hopefully we can reach wider numbers. Our ideal would be just to not exist. We shouldn't need to exist. Families should be in a position where their children have beds.
That's sort of a good result, isn't it? If you're no longer needed. Yeah,
exactly. And that would make a huge difference if social housing properties were furnished.
One thing that, sorry if I missed it, but do you take in second-hand beds and actually, pass on second-hand beds, or are they all brand new?
So everything that we provide for the families is new. So a lot of people do always want to donate beds to us, which is really generous. But for us, we want to give them a new bed. A lot of the children might not have had very much new things for themselves. They'll have had a lot of hand-me-downs, second-hand things from charity shops, and actually to give them their own bed that is just theirs is a really nice feeling to have, well, this is mine and it's new. I guess the other thing as well is that the beds that we provide should provide at least kind of 6 years, maybe 6 to 8 years of kind of being working, good functioning quality beds. And so if we go out and deliver a bed to a child that's maybe just starting in reception, that will hopefully see them most of the way through their school journey in a way that obviously with second-hand beds, that's not going to be as reliable for us.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And what you talked about, sort of expansion and plans to do more. What are the sort of areas you're targeting in the UK? Have you got a plan for that, or?
I mean, we look at really any area where there are kind of higher levels of deprivation, but also if we've got to have the kind of financial backing, I guess, to go there. So we also look at where there might be either businesses or organisations that would be in a position to give us some kind of funding to go to those areas. So as I mentioned earlier, the Northwest has got very high areas of deprivation, so that would be an area that we'd be looking at. Also places around East Yorkshire, so kind of around Hull, those sort of areas. But as I said, there's lots of different factors that we have to take into account when we're looking at expanding outwards.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Lovely. Well, Rose, thank you very much for the conversation. Again, I've learnt an awful lot this morning. Hopefully the listeners and watchers have as well. So anyone interested in supporting or volunteering, please look up Zarach.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.